Hello, tonight, January 14th, 2018. I am bringing to you another program, the second program we're doing on the Kardec Radio Facebook site. Again, we're also on Kardec Radio, which you can download on your Apple or Android device. You can get Spiritist programs 24 hours a day. And then also, always please join, come to the Kardec Radio Facebook site, and therefore you can get the latest live streaming, the latest information all about Spiritism. Ask questions, make comments, anything you can. Everyone here on the Kardec Radio site would be absolutely pleased to help you on any question you'd have to learn more about Spiritism and the spirit world around us. So tonight we're going to discuss the lower zone. First, what's the lower zone? As I've said before, the lower zone, as Chico Xavier, Francisco C. Xavier said before, the lower zone starts at your nose, which a lot of people say is like at the crust of the earth, and it goes to the first level of heaven. What is the purpose of the lower zone? The purpose of the lower zone are for spirits who have not risen to the level of their attitude and personality and to be into one of the cities of heaven, one of the celestial cities of heaven. Oh, hello, Carlos. So, but no one's there in the lower zone forever. In fact, you read a lot about people saying, and I've gotten emails and so forth. People say, I feel like my uncle, my brother, my father, or my mother, their spirit's still around me. And that usually means that spirit, that person, is still in the lower zone and still thinks or still wants to be associated with you or your family, and they haven't yet seen the light or went to the path of the light in order to rise out of the lower zone. Everybody will eventually. No one is even in purgatory, which is below the surface of the earth. No one is there forever. It all depends on how you change your attitude and your beliefs. And then the law of affinity will, as you change yourself, you will rise to where others are like you. That is the wonderful part of that. And Spiritism tells us all. The Spiritism is the third revelation. It all started with this person, Allan Kardec, which we've named our radio and our Facebook site from. And you can get this book on the EDICI bookstore. If you go to my blog, nwspiritism.com, and you click on his picture, it will take you right to that bookstore. Also, you can find all of his books on PDF. That's how I found it. I didn't buy them at first. I only bought them later when then I understood how important they were, and I wanted to study them. So you can buy all of his books either from Amazon.com or EDICI bookstore, but also you can look up Allan Kardec PDF, right? Just put a space PDF, and you'll find his books on PDF. But now, tonight, what are we talking about? We're talking about the lower zone, and we're talking about the lower zone as it's presented to us by the Reverend G. Val Owen. Now, the Reverend G. Val Owen had a series of messages. He was an Anglican vicar, Church of England, and he was talked to by his mother and other spirits. And in fact, he actually wrote a series of these messages, and he let the newspaper print them he didn't charge anything to it. He was very, very poor, but he didn't believe that, he should charge for any of the spirit messages that came to him. And he opened up a whole new world. Now, Allan Kardec started in the 1850s. And Leon Denis wrote, and other spiritist authors wrote about the lower zone and other places. And then, of course, Francisco C. Xavier, also known as Chico Xavier, came around, born in 1910. And in the 1930s, more like the 40s, 50s, his books really, became popular. He started hearing about them. He told us a lot about the lower zone and other places. But interesting is at the time Chico was born, that's when G. Val Owen was actually receiving his messages. And he kind of gives us a little bit of a different picture, right? Because remember, everything we see from the spirit world, it's like we're looking through a keyhole and we see shadows and we see things, and even the writings that come to us, they hint at things, right? And they explain things, much better than anything else that I think you could read about the spirit world, why we're here on earth, etc. But I'm sure there's so much more to learn. And that's why the more we can decipher from different spiritist authors, the more we can learn about why we're here on earth and what we should be doing. So let's get to it, the lower zone. So we want to tell you about the fact, and this is a transmission from the Spirit Kathleen to the Reverend Jiva Owen. Now, Kathleen was she was kind of the focal point of communication, Jiva Owen. There was many spirits around him, and they collectively used their information, put it through Kathleen because she was the most attuned with his mind and how he thought, and also the modern English, right? Because you can tell some of these spirits when you see the messages in the books, they kind of use an older English when they talk to the Reverend Jiva Owen. And she tells us how a spirit of what they call the leader of her little group, how he helped a soul whom he had worked with in the past on earth out of the lower zone. And in this message is told to us, symbols are important. They have meaning. And the meaning is more important than the symbol itself. Kathleen, a spirit, of course, I said a spirit who spoke for the group, tells us how a lower spirit managed to lead a group of poor souls from the dark region into the light, all by the use of a symbol. Now, this is where, a lot of these things, you don't see this on the books by Andre Luis or other authors. So it's very interesting. So she begins her communication. She explains about the power of signs and the power of a name. The name of God and Jesus, she expounds, must be held in the highest reverence on earth and in the spirit realm. Knowing the name of high angel also has great force and consequence. It must be used carefully. You notice in the Old Testament, the Bible, the high angels that came rarely gave their name, and just some, and actually they'd ask, "What's your name?" Well, I'm not going to tell you. And again, they'll say that here. They won't tell you their true name, and I believe a lot of that is if you know the name of a spirit, it's like having their cell phone number, right? And you call that name, and they will just know about it because of the rapid, faster than light transmission information within the spirit world. So while names can be invoked, so can symbols. And like individuals, some symbols are more powerful than others. And Kathleen tells us about one of the most potent symbols on earth. And this is what she said. She says, "Make the sign of the cross when you feel at all doubtful of our presence with you. It will help you both realize our protection and your own freedom from all intrusion of those who would prevent us by coming in between. Not bodily, but by projection of their thought. Influences which make a mist to obscure. You will mind, friend, that in degree they come nearer to you than we do, and there have a vantage ground which we want." Now, when she says they, she's talking about the lower spirits. That, because remember, we live in a sea of spirits, and in here we actually live in the lower zone where these spirits exist. So we swim in a sea of good spirits and bad spirits, kind of like being in your middle school or junior high, right? You've got good kids, and I don't want to say bad kids, but more ignorant, more rough, kids, and you live with all that, and you experience all of it. That's what we live in, right? And that's on purpose because we live in the planet of atonement. We are here to learn to filter out bad ideas and bad thoughts. Just like in school, you learn to say, I don't think I'm going to trust that person, right? And of course, you get all sorts of great advice when you're in, 7th or 8th grade. It's the worst advice you could get. Well, that's the same way we're on earth. Many times we'll have this terrible advice, and we have to learn to filter that out. So then when Reverend Jiva Owen heard this from Kathleen, he goes, well, okay. He goes, give me an example of the intrinsic power of the symbol of the cross. And Kathleen told the story her leader passed through to her, and she told this to Jiva Owen. And this is what the leader told Jiva Owen. He goes, I was once sent to search for a man who had strangely enough been brought on passing from earth into the second sphere. They mean the second level of heaven. But he's not fitted to dwell there and gravitated to the spheres below. I will not pause to explain this in matter in particular. It is rare that such a thing comes to pass, not unknown. However, such mistakes are made here and there by guides of lesser knowledge. Their zeal outruns their powers of discernment and of penetration. And when a difficult and entangled personality comes over, mistakes are sometimes made. I descended to the spheres of gloom, and therefore, and when somewhat conditioned thereto, I began my search. I went from city to city, and at last I came to a gate where I felt his presence within. You perhaps not readily understand that I have but just given you. Let it pass, you will one day. Passing within, I came to the murky glimmerings of light prevailing to a square wherein a large crowd was gathered. So let's talk about that. He went from city to city. There are cities in the lower zone. This is also told to us in books by other spiritist writers. And of course, the great series of books by the spirit Andre Luis given to Chico Xavier. He talks about going to cities. There are cities, there are minds, there's a form of government, always dictatorial, not nice government, right? Because you're there with more of the people where the strongest survive, the strongest will survive. There's a whole life, there's a whole ecosystem of, small little nation, city states, I should say, tribal areas where the strong men, will gather people, around them. It's not a nice place. It's not a place you really want to be. But you will learn. All of us have been there, either recently or not. I must have been there, and actually deeper than that. But this will let us understand what is outside, right? Because when we die, we don't lose anything. We just lose this physical body. We are who we are. Our personality is who our personality. If we are a kind, wonderful person, we are a kind, wonderful spirit as we pass over. If we were not kind, if we were mean, if we were sarcastic, if we tried to take advantage of others, guess what? We are the same when we pass over. This is the great mundane secret that Spiritism has brought to us. Do not worry about death. Worry about where you're going to go after death. Death is just one transformation. And understand this. You've died many times. You've born many times. You've been in many, many lives. And the purpose of your life on earth is to rise. So, and he says, well, you won't understand how I found it. Well, you'll see from other books is that there is everything is connected in the spirit realm. And in the higher spirit, the more they're connected with, this universal intelligence, this supreme intelligence. And they will feel, and they'll get directions, almost, somewhat, sometimes directly, sometimes with images, sometimes with feelings from on high saying, okay, yeah, this is the place you should go. So they're always in contact. Us here on earth, we're in contact with our guardian spirit and maybe other spirits. Even spirits on the lower levels, in any levels of heaven, really, I'm sure are in contact with some superior levels that they're watching. You always have your guardian spirit. Doesn't make if you're in physical or you're in spirit form. So he went into the city, and these cities are usually dingy, broken down. They're just pale reflections of earth. And he said the air seemed ruddy of hue and like a smith's working house. So it's kind of smoky and musty. They always say the light doesn't penetrate much. And he goes, there was a crowd. And the crowd was either uplifted or depressed and angry, grew weary. And standing on the stone block was the man I sought. So he saw this man talking to a large crowd. He spoke to them in a harsh voice, earnestly, and I stood behind them and listened a while. So he saw this man talking to a group. Now, the person that the leader was looking for, he was into level heaven, but he descended. Now, his mind must not have been ready to release all the selfishness and material longings. Many people who are not evil people, they're very nice, kind people throughout their whole lives, but they could be tied to, their wonderful possession, the house that they love, gold, their possessions. They're materially tied to earth. That's a lot of times reasons for someone to be in the lower zone. And so hence, he wasn't ready to release all these ties, or it could have been selfishness too. So invisible strings still tied him to the earth, and hence he didn't feel comfortable where the spirits thought he would fit in. Instead, he journeyed to where others were like himself. That's the law of affinity. It just happens. So then the leader starts talking about the crowd. And he's talking about what this man was saying. And the man was saying, he was telling them of the redemption and of the Redeemer, not by name, mark you, but by allusion. This is what he said. Twice or thrice I saw the name upon his lips. But it never came forth, for whenever it happened there, I saw a wave of pain sweep over his face, and his hand gripped inward on themselves. Now, everything I'm reading to you when I quote these things, of course, is in this book, Heaven and Below. So what I did with the Reverend G. Val Owens is I took his messages and I categorized them by information about heaven, information about the lower zone, information about Christ on earth, information on spirits attributes. And then with his G. Val Owens messages from different spirits, I compared them to information from other spiritist authors. And so, okay, this is additive information. This is comparative information. So I try to give a really good look at different aspects of the spirit world. Why? So we can all understand our place here. Why are we here? What's happening to us? What should we do, right? Where should we go? What attitude should we have? This is the complete reason I'm presenting this, and this program is for people to understand where each individual thinks they lie within their life plan, within their life blueprint. So to go on. So he was saying, but he couldn't say the name, right? Because, and I've read other stories like this, the name means something, right? Because it's the spirit world is more energy and force, and that name, has power, right? It's like this, the heaven is where people create with their minds, right? As you go higher and higher. It's like the most fantastic science fiction or fantasy novel you have ever read. It's like everyone has the power of a nuclear reactor on their belt, because the higher spirits, they can create, a group of higher spirits can create buildings, anything. So it's on earth, we think and then we do. In the higher levels of heaven, in the lower levels, you still have to manually do things. But in the higher levels, you think, I want a chair, you build a chair, right? I want to make a bird, you make a bird, all through your mind. Thought is action. That's why even in the lower zone, they understand that. So every time he tried to say the name of Jesus or something, he saw there was a wave of pain across his face. And his hand gripped, right? He was nervous, but he spoke, so the words he spoke, no one could doubt who he was talking about. And for a long time, he urged them to repent and told them what the lack of spirit learning had done by him, bringing him down willy-nilly from his short glimpse of heaven and light into the thick gloom of these underworlds of pain and remorse. And what he was urging them was to do this. He said he had come, and he said when he descended from that second level of heaven, he memorized how he went. And he says, I want a group of us, because the path is dangerous. I want a group of us to come together and ascend into a team. But I can only have people ascend into the team who want to, because he knows it won't work without that. So he called upon them to come together. And so the crowd wanted to know, okay, and he says, I'm going to make you a banner. And this banner will give you strength. It will be a great symbol of strength, and it will also help protect us. And the crowd goes, okay, what banner? And then he tried to trace the sign of the cross in the air, but he couldn't do it. And then the leader behind him gave him power to trace the cross. And then the leader said, okay, I'm going to also make this shine in the air. And so he did. He made the sign of the cross and he made it shine. Of course, this is one of the lower levels of Cities Heaven. And when he did that, he heard from the crowd moaning and crying. And he looked again and he just saw this crowd within the city. They were prostrate. They were writhing in the dust. They were seeking to hide their face, and they wanted to blot out the memory. And so this is like bad memories. This is why people say in the lower zone or dark abyss they experience pain, and it's the memory, and it's the memory pain, and it's the shame of failure, which I'm sure we've all had. And it was not that they hated this symbol of the cross. It's that it was just at the level they were in the lower zone, whereas people were even lower would see it and wouldn't think about it, right? They were trying to get better, and it just triggered the fact that they had so much remorse and they felt so bad that they hadn't done better. It gave them real pain. And so he saw that. He goes, oh, I shouldn't have done that, right? I should not have had, I should let him do what he was doing without me interfering. And then therefore, then the leader said, yes, the group did indeed leave on their long and arduous journey. And their banner was a cross, but it was not a perfectly fashioned cross. It was like two sticks kind of wrapped together, and, where it's kind of, angle wise. It was as good as they could have done. And the entire pilgrimage lasted for a long time, but they eventually made it to the lower regions of heaven, always following the cross, the symbol of hope and love. And of course, this is how spirits are helped to get out of the lower levels of heaven. So there's a lot of lesson in this for us. One is now, and I know in the books of Henri Louis, you will see there will be spirit forces, and if someone is on the lower level of heaven, like Henri Louis did in the first book, No Solar, which is also a movie, he gets on his knees, please help me, God. And they'll have rescue things that, good, we'll take you to a city. That happens also, and you've seen that in other books. But also, you'll also see from the books of Jiva Owen, they will say, okay, make the journey yourself. And of course, we all know if you have to do something that's important and you do it yourself versus someone does it for you, it makes that much more important, right? It's the same as us on earth. We are on earth to figure out for ourselves. There is a God, there is a spirit world, right? Christ is our leader. And, so people will ask, well, why doesn't this God come down and tell us? Yeah, I'm God, right? I tell you to do everything. That's not why we're on earth. We're here to change your personality because of the experiences we go through and the experiences that are predetermined for us. Imagine next week, God came down and said, I'm God. If you kill each other, do anything wrong, you're in big trouble, right? Just very simple. A week would go by. People would be pretty good, right? A month would go by. They'd start forgetting. Because what would happen? You would not do anything bad, right? Because you were afraid to, because you knew there was a punishment. On the other hand, on our own journey, and we learn, God, I do something bad. I don't like myself. I don't like it. It's not good. It's not productive. That changes your personality. The same rules on the lower zone and here is that we have to change ourselves, not because someone says, hey, Brian, stop doing that. You're going to be in trouble. I'll give you a ticket, right? No, it's because I don't want to do that. The same thing. This is, and these are just the wonderful revelations that come to us from the different spirits as writers. So there's another one. Another aspect is they're talking about, and this was in book 3 of The Life Beyond the Veil of the Reverend Jiva Owen Gorse. Now, so in this book, I take it from, there's 4 books that Jiva Owen did on the Life Beyond the Veil, and there's also 2 other books that he had, book 5, book 6, and then Paul and Albert. So every book that he wrote, I have in my series of 3 books, all about, and I categorize everything, as I said before, about life beyond the veil and the messages he had. So on another message, he was talking about a valiant group of spirits who crossed the borderline between the first level of heaven and the lower zone. So these, a lot of times, these spirits, just as you saw in the books by Andre Louise, right? A group of spirits will be sent from, from heaven. They'll be sent into the lower zone to assist other people. And where they find, just as they did in Chico Xavier's book, they'll find suffering souls who reside in ignorance and self-denial until they too determine that life in an environment of love and kindness is superior to the one lived submerged in our baser emotions of hate, selfishness, and jealousy. Again, this is the way, this is why the lower zone, the dark abyss, you do evil on this world, or you're tied too much to earth, and that's a punishment. You're sent to hell as a punishment. No, it's not a punishment. It is, the way the spirit world helps to resolve, let's say, evil people or ignorant people is probably a better word, is the spirit world uses that ignorance, that evil, to combat evil. Because with the law of affinity, you're down in that lower zone with ignorant and selfish spirits, and you're there maybe because you're ignorant and selfish or materialistic, and you're saying, oh, I'm living in the world that I kind of thought I was in the physical world, and I don't like this. So it's not meant to punish, it's meant to open your eyes so you can see, okay, well, if everybody is like you, enjoy. That's how it works. And that's why, you have to consider us. I hate to say this to everybody. We're pretty immature, right? We're immature spirits. We're like the kindergartners or the elementary school of the spirit world. We're very low on the totem pole. That's why Jesus Christ said to be humble, because evidently we should be humble, when we look up and say, oh, there's a college student, right? Or a high school student. I wish I could be that someday. That's us. So I know sometimes it's hard to learn that sometimes, but there you go. So this valiant group of spirits descend into the lower zone, and ordinarily discarnates in lower zone would not be able to see, touch, or sense a higher spirit. Now, why is that? As you go higher in the spirit world, you become less matter, less dense, and more energy. That's why people who have had near-death experiences, and they'll see some of their family members. Oh, there's Uncle Joe, right? Because Uncle Joe's still kind of relatively low, and he can see them. But then they'll see, I saw an angel, and all I could see was this brightness, and I could barely make out their face. Well, that's because that higher spirit is more energy, and that light is the reflection of love. Their love's in their heart, and the love within the atmosphere of the spirit world bounces off from them, bounces back as light, and therefore this person had an NDE really can't see that angel. Now, if they were on the same level as that spirit, it looked normal. So, see, Spiritism tells us so much. There's so much we learn, and then it's so interesting to get into it, because when you look at people and you hear NDEs and what they saw. And in fact, I've written a couple books on that. The spirit world talks to us, and you see what happened and what the spirit world was trying to tell them, and exactly the processes. It's so interesting. The more you get into it, there's so much information about this given to us by Spiritism and by, as Allan Kardec, the third revelation, gave to us, is that you will just see life in a different context. I guarantee you. It opens your eyes, and it's all logical, right? Spiritism. Once I found Spiritism, I said, okay, now my big questions are answered. I now understand why good things happen to bad people and bad things happen to good people, right? That's, to me, it was always we always say there's no God, because why are children killed, right? Why are innocents killed? Well, there's always a reason. It could be past lives. It could be part of their plan. There's always a reason. And remember this, when people are killed, it's taking a chess piece off the board. That chess piece can go back on the board at any one time. You're immortal. You can't be killed. This body, right, can be killed, can be destroyed, but you will never be destroyed. Okay, so when the group went to the lower zone, they wanted to be seen by people because they wanted to help people, and therefore they started to make themselves more dense. And this is what they told him. So this is what they told Reverend G. Vowell, and it goes, "For you will mark that we are not to pursue that method by which the higher ones may sustain their contact with those in the darkness, yet be to them unseen. We were to condition ourselves, as hereto, to the environment of the spheres inferior to our own. So now to those of even of lower estate, so that we become a body, not indeed so dense and gross as the inhabitants improper, but yet so nearly approximate as at times to be able to be visible to them at will." Now, so this is one of the things I'll point out in my books is from Reverend G. Vowell, who never called himself a spiritist, yet in all he was a spiritist. You hear the exact same thing from the books by Andre Luis. Okay, and they will say, "Andre, concentrate, make yourself more dense so these people can see us," right? You'll read that. So this is one of the just wonderful things, but they talk about things a little bit differently. So, and this communication was given to G. Vowell on December 31st, 1917. And now, in 1949, in a book, Psychograph, by the late Chico Xavier, Andre Luis, now listen what so this is what Reverend G. Vowell, right? This is what the Spirit told him. We had to concentrate, we had to make our body more dense, right? And we just had to breathe, we had to get to the ambient of the atmosphere. So this is what Andre Luis described in the group experience when they too descended. This is 1949 versus 1917, deep into the lower spheres of the earth. This is what Andre Luis said. "We may not be in infernal caves, but we have reached the great empire of the perverse and backward intelligences who dwell close to the planet's surface, where incarnates suffer their ongoing influence. The time has come for us to make a small testimony. A large capacity for selfishness is crucial so that we may achieve our purposes. We could fail for lack of patience or want of sacrifice. For most of the backward brothers and sisters when we meet will be no more than discarnates unaware of our destinies." Then he says, "We begin by inhaling the thick substances wafting around us as if the air were composed of viscous fluids." And then he goes, "And then his friend grasped, despite my feeling, I tried to copy the approach of our instructor, who was silent, extremely pale, and was adjusting to the metamorphosis. And I was disoriented and noticed that our intentional integration with the elements of the lower plane was disfiguring us enormously. Little by little, we felt heavier. I felt like I had suddenly reconnected to my physical body because although I was still in control of my own individuality, I found myself covered in dense matter, as if I had unexpectedly been forced to wear heavy armor." So you see, the things connect, right? 32 years differently, they say the same thing. In the 1850s, Allan Kardec, they say the same thing. This is why when you learn about Spiritism, you want to read about different people's encounters with spirits and so on, you really want to make sure that it's a Spiritist author, or you read it carefully and you look at the similarities, right? Because they won't always say the word Spiritism, just like Reverend G. Vowell. But of course, I found he was really a Spiritist author when I read about him in another book by Chico Xavier, which they mentioned him by name, called Voltaire. Not out in English yet. I hope it does get out in English. So, hence, the process and the method were consistent over a span of 32 years. From one group of spirits sending the messages to a Brazilian, right? To another, to an English Anglican priest. Both explained how spirits from higher levels of heaven must transform themselves into more dense matter so they can be seen. So to go on with what the Reverend G. Vowell showed, he says, "So we took the path downward, and as we went, the gloom became more gloomy, and the chill more full of fear, because that whole atmosphere rents, throughout the lower zone. But we knew we went to help, and to fear not. And so we did not hesitate in our steps, but we went rarely with all, and looking this way and that way for the right path. And our first station lay a little to the right as we went, and not between the restland and the ridge. And it was a colony of those who were weary of the death life they had endured, and yet who lacked the strength to break away, or the knowledge which way to take it. So these were sent to help. These people were trying to emerge out of lower zone. They just didn't have that final step, that final knowledge, right? As teachers, will help students who are striving but just can't get it. The spirit world will help other spirits. He said they saw many ruined buildings. Decay was all around us. It seemed to us that no one had ever made any house once it began to fall into disrepair. Having built it, they left it to build another one elsewhere at the first sign of wear, or having tired of it before it was finished, had left to build another. Listlessness and want of endurance was all about us in the air. Listlessness of weary despair and despondency of doubt, both of their own strength and of their neighbor's purpose. So they saw trees with bare branches. If they noticed a leaf, the leaf had thorns, right? And finally they came upon a small disorganized village. It was a small village. The houses were mainly stones, stacked upon one another, are mud huts. And they found a group of spirits huddled around a fire. And they've been sitting around the flickering fire in sullen silence, right? And then this group of higher spirits stood outside of that ring behind them. And none of them looked up. And had they done so, they would have seen us, but their eyes they would not have seen us, their eyes not being attuned to our state, which was not quite modified to the degree. So then they started shifting themselves so they could see it. And then they sensed somebody was there. And so they lifted their eyes, and then the group said, "Oh," goes, "Who are you?" And then, "Who are you?" And then they said, "Okay." The leader of this group stepped forward and said, "Look, you look weary, my friend, and much disturbed in mind. Can we befriend you in any way?" So the leader of this little group, and they heard his voice, and it was like a long drawn sigh, right, when he answered him. He goes, "Who may you be?" Because this is the spirit in the lower zone. "There are more than one of you, for others I see behind you, and you are not neighborly to this land. From what land do you come, and why do you come to us in this dark place?" And he said, then the spirit, who was kind of the leader of the higher spirits, looked at him. He says, I think I knew this person. He goes, "Yes." In his own mind, he was a magistrate in the town near his home where he had lived during his physical life. And then I said, I called him by name. And he looked at me confused, but not with comprehension. So I named the town he was in, and then said the name of his wife. And at length he looked down again and put his hand to his forehead and tried to call to memory. Again, we'll hear this from Andre Louise. It's like you live in a little bit of fuzziness. Your mind's not completely clear when you're in the lower zone and below. And it's hard to create real, coherent thoughts sometimes. So then he says, I remember. The guy says, "I remember, whatever. Do you bring me news of her? Why did she leave me like this?" So again, the first thing that came out was this, a little bit angry that he was left in this terrible place and she hadn't come to him. He had to get himself out of this, the stupor. Sometimes they can do it, but it takes a lot of energy. So he repeated his answer and began to explain. He goes, he loved his wife. And this is what the higher spirit says. He knew he loved his wife because they can read their minds. And in his own rather selfish way, went into earth life. And I thought to pull him back to her with talking about and saying her name. But he broke in upon me. He said, "Then she'll not come to me now. I have fallen on evil times." And then I told her, said, "Look, she cannot come all the way. You must go your way to her, and she will meet you." And then he cried out in anger, then let her be damned for a proud, hard case wench. She was ever the fine lady saint to me, and moaning over my little lapses. Tell her, if you come from her parts, she can stay in her spotless mansion and gloat upon her husband's state. They be here in plenty more pleasurable than she, if not so calmly. And if she will descend from her high estate, she'll have a rousing rout for her reception. So good day to you, sir. And he sneered and he turned away and laughed to the crowd for their approval. Of course, this is what you get. You get this foul humor, this biting sarcasm, this, not nice, right? Not a nice place to be. So how many of us had conversations like that with those where we thought we're doing something good, and then it was just really, the opposite happened. They took it the wrong way, and it exploded from there. It happens. And it happens in the lower zone. And it just shows you with the lower zone. The lower zone is not a comfortable place. Therefore, whatever sacrifices one must make to make sure that you increase your spiritual quotient, that you place your goodness and honesty, charity, and fraternity above your material desires, will be rewarded 100-fold. It's said to us many times in spiritualist literature. So, and again, this just shows that we live in a world with mind-numbing drugs at hand, with mind-numbing television, YouTube, and other, I'll be on, with other social media videos at hand to divert our attention to the next material desire. So it's really tough in this material life to raise your head up long enough to say, I'm not going to buy that. I'm going to spend my time studying and reading and meditating and trying to get myself in tune with the spirit world. And that's what the spirit of Tal Chico Xavier says to study. The spirit Joanna de Angelis will say, look, if you want to do it, spend some time meditating. Take the same hour on the same day of the week and just relax and let the messages from the spirit world come into you. It may not happen fast, may take a couple of weeks, but do that, and they'll know at that same time and date that they will start giving you inspiration and helping you relax and de-stress. And I tell you, the more you relax and de-stress and you follow your own conscience, that's what we're here on earth. Remember, as I said before, we're surrounded by bad advice. We use our conscience. That's what was given to us as we were born, to filter out the bad ideas and to allow the good ideas in. So after being publicly refuted by, the High Spirit noticed another person rise, and he took the magistrate aside for a private conversation. And the unknown man, who was dressed the same as the others, and he walked with grace, and he seemed to possess a caring stance. Then he came up to the higher spirit to talk to the magistrate before. And he told him this. He goes, sir, this man did not quite understand the purport of your words, nor that you really did come to comfort and not to taunt. That's what he was used to, of course. He is some little repentant that he spoke to you in words such as were unseemly. I have told him that you and he were not altogether unknown to each other once. Of your kindness, sir, speak to him again, but not of his wife, for as yet he cannot endure her desertion, as he names her absence. And seeing that the man's advice was well-founded, the High Spirit tried again. And this time he went and had a private chat with no one else listening, the magistrate, and gave him some points to ponder. And afterwards, the High Spirit went over to this mysterious fellow who gave him this wonderful advice, right? And he says, okay, well, I thank you in turn, He goes, I could not longer delay discovery of myself to you. So who he thought was just another citizen of this lower zone goes, I am not of this region, sir, but of the fourth sphere. I'm here by choice to do service. So we talk about the fourth sphere of heaven. Again, as I will say, I've said before in other streaming Facebook and videos, is Reverend G. Owens, all of the spirits that talk to him, they use this numbering system. Numbering system is not used, I've seen in other spiritual literature. They said, just to be consistent, we'll use it. So there's all different ways of doing that. So don't look for consistency with this numbering system. And then the higher spirit said, well, do you live here constant? And he said, yes, for a long time, yes. But when depression becomes too heavy, I return for a little by replenishing to my own home and then come here once again. And since I came here first, some 60 years have gone in earth time. and I have returned to my home 9 times. And several of those I knew on earth came here in the first early period, but none of late. They're all strangers now. Yet still I contrived to help them one by one. And then the High Spirit goes, oh, I feel ashamed. I thought I was making this great sacrifice, myself and my friends, coming down here, making ourselves dense. And here this guy's been here 60 years helping people in this horrible location. It just shows you that no matter where you are, we can all learn. And of course, this higher spirit was from the 10th level, 6 levels higher than this person in the 4th level. So we all can learn from it. And this is what's so great in the messages you see to the Reverend G. Bowen, because they talk about themselves, they talk about their attitude, they talk about how they learn, they talk about how they ascended, they talk about when they descend, they go, they're still learning, right? And the other thing is it's just for us to know, is the ambassadors from heaven are not only present in the lower zone for errant spirits, but they're here for us too, for we reside in the lower zone amongst those who have yet to realize they no longer have a physical form that we can recognize. We walk by and we do not see or sense others who are suffering, right? All the time. While higher spirits are among us giving advice and help to those who have started to express a desire to travel toward the light. That's all of us. Our guardian angels are here. They're in touch with us. They are like the teacher who just looks for the child who has that spark, who is trying, right? And they want to help that person who's trying. And they will. I've heard some marvelous stories of NDEs. This one lady, I was at a NDE conference, and she says, this guardian angel, and I called him Frank because he was very frank. And he would tell me, don't do that. And he goes, oh, but I didn't listen to him. And she was just a marvelous personality because she was just saying how stubborn she was. And I didn't listen to him, but then this happened, right? And he goes, oh, I should have listened to him. And it's a marvelous character. And so, they'll give you advice, right? It's like when you go to a medium. Now, when you go to a spiritist medium, a medium's meeting, I should say, is you will hear, this higher spirits will hear, messages of love, of education, of forgiveness, of compassion, how you should work for that. But, you go to like another type of medium, like some of them are on TV, and I'm sure they're all good people, but you'll hear things like, okay, where to find those car keys, right? Or, am I going to find love, or is my boyfriend, so-and-so a good guy or whatever. So what I think I want to make sure people understand is when mediums attract spirits at their level. And therefore, a medium who is a spiritist will attract higher level spiritists who will not tell you your future unless a rare circumstance. They will give you spiritual guidance. The mediums who are not spiritists are some of them don't have to be spiritists, they're on a higher level. And I've actually seen some of them, I heard them on TV, and you can tell they're very great spiritual people. But other ones are on a lower level. They have that gift of mediumship, but they're getting their advice from lower spirits, right? They'll get their advice from the spirit on the level that they themselves are. So remember that, is if you ever try to seek your own, advice from beyond, that I think it's much safer for you to study and read books about spiritism, because I tell you, the central theme that you will read over and over and over again is one that we must work on our own self-improvement. We are here on earth to remove the blemishes that we have, and that we go through suffering. It's like a kiln, right? You make the clay pot, and you're put into this white heat, right? To set in place that clay pot. That's what we're here. We're put into this white heat. They call it, suffering is a great cleanser. It's unfortunate, but that's why we're here on earth, right? Why is there a physical life? Well, my opinion, and I think I've seen this other, but I haven't seen it stated exactly this way, is that in the spirit world, you don't have that same physicality, that same, where in the heavens, it's too comfortable. It's a place where we can grow intellectually without stress, without fear. And then if the lower zones is you're really learning just to be a decent human, a decent person, decent personality. Whereas in the physical life, where you have all these emotions, everything, and the intellectual part, I hate to say this, but we're not really here to be intellectual giants. It's more here to change our character. And that's why some people who you could appear to be very lower intelligence may actually be a very high intelligent spirit, but they have been ratcheted down, so they're not going to be able to enjoy that, because maybe in a previous life they were so smart, but they didn't learn anything, right? They didn't learn anything emotionally. They were so smart and they used it for bad, right? They used it to take advantage of people. Well, this time they're going to be ratcheted down. I already know how to use that. And you're going to learn things, other things than what this intellectual. So that's why we're on Earth. This is what, again, the lesson of is that we're on Earth to transform our personality, our character, our morals. And that is the most important thing, that we are here. We're not here to be billionaires or millionaires, right? We're not here to take advantage of other people. We're not here to hate other people. Now, again, as Jesus said, the meek shall inherit the earth. He didn't. He didn't mean, and this is, I think, was in the Gospel according to Christ in one of Allan Kardec's books. He didn't mean meek being passive, right? Someone hit you and do nothing. What it was meant is, when he meant by meek, is to harness your energy, but don't focus your energy in anger. Focus in indignation or direct, and then use it politely, right? Polite. And I hope most of us had a chance to work for some organization or some boss who was a great person, and he got things done by positive leadership, right? And that's really what we're talking. It's being civilized, being true, not being petty. That is what is meant by meek. And that's what we all need to be, is we need to be always of positive, helpful, of assistance. When someone we think is ignorant, we say, hey, you're stupid. No, is again and again, we've said, look, as the spirit world has told us, look at ignorance as like a wound or a disease, and then help cure it, right? You may have to sometimes be a bit severe. The spirit world's sometimes severe with us, right? It's like with kids, a child, a 3-year-old child runs out in the street, and you keep telling them, don't do that. And then you may have to slap them by the hand or put them in a corner and say, stay there until you learn that lesson, right? And they cry, and they think that the world has been destroyed because they were thwarted what they wanted to do. But you didn't do that because you wanted to hurt the child. You did that because you wanted to help the child, the same way that we are helped. So again, I just want to tell everybody, as I'm ending, please sign up for Kardec Radio on your Apple or Android device. You go to the App Store or the PlayStation Store, look up Kardec Radio. Sign up to Kardec Radio Facebook. Again, this is Allan Kardec. You can find all of his books on PDF if you don't want to spend the money on. But I recommend buying this book. It's a great book. It's one of his main books. The Gospel According to Spiritism. Again, oh my God, a great book. The books by Chico Xavier. Read the Andre Louis series. And I just want to also say is, if you're interested in the Reverend Ziva Owen, which I tell you, it opens up a lot more information than you'll see in most of the Spiritist books in Portuguese that have been translated in English. This gives you a different view. Oh, and Cynthia, thank you too. Thank you for being part of our radio program today. I just feel so happy to to be able to come to you, come to the people who are joining this. And I thank you for those on Kardec Radio who actually shared this video. I think that helps a lot. I've had actually people come to me and say, "Oh, you know, saw your video on the site, which I'd never heard of before, and it must have been shared by you know, one of these wonderful people on Kardec Radio." And so I think, you know, it's amazing, these little seeds. And what I've been to mediums meetings, and my wife and I will get messages, and they'll say, you know, you're planting seeds. And I've talked to other people that are, you know, helping promote the spiritism and so forth, and they have the similar messages. You know, don't think we're going to see this, you know, this thing blossom fast, but no, we're just all working together. You know, we got to get the word out, talk about spiritism, get the name of Allan Kardec, hopefully something from their life in the spirit world that will trigger them and go, oh, yes, okay, I know what that is. And then they'll dive deeper and they'll think about it. So again, I want to thank everybody for listening to the program. And again, God bless all of you. And I'll do the ending credits right now. Goodbye, and thank you again.